Hello, everybody. This is Jacob Sapochnik with the Enchanting Lawyer Podcast. Welcome to our show. This is a show where we interview entrepreneurs and very inspiring professionals, and they share their stories with us. Once again, I wanted to thank our listeners for the amount of emails and messages that I get about this show, and I'm very inspired to continue doing this. So thank you very much. Today, I have Carl Shusterman. Carl Shusterman is an immigration attorney based in Los Angeles. He is what I call a lawyer's lawyer. I personally have a strong admiration for Carl. I'm an immigration attorney myself, and I'm very honored to have Carl on the show. Carl has been a former trial attorney for the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service back in the 70s and in the 80s. And in 1982, he started his own practice. Carl has been extensively covered in many magazines. He was featured in the National Law Journal, the Wall Street Journal, Computer World, Benders on Immigration, Los Angeles Business Journal, and many, many others. He's also been quoted as an authority on immigration law by CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS, and many, many other outlets. He also testified before Congress on immigration. Carl's website, Shusterman.com, is considered to be one of the top authority in the world on immigration law, with more than 1,000 articles that keep being added every day. And Carl, I'm excited and very honored to have you on the show, and welcome. How are you?
My pleasure. I'm doing great, Jacob. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So, Carl, I gave a little introduction about yourself, but why don't you tell our listeners a bit about you, about your practice, how many attorneys, where you're located, and then we can dive into the show.
Okay. Our office is actually in downtown Los Angeles. Our clients happen to be all over the world. My assistants, who are usually in their early 20s, are way ahead of me. So a couple of years ago, they got me doing Skype interviews. So it's pretty typical in any day. I might be talking to somebody in Singapore and somebody in Abu Dhabi or someplace like that. We have 7 lawyers. Except for the boss, they're all immigrants from all different countries all around the world. We have about 20 people all together. They speak over 16 languages, and we're a great team. I mean, I'm the one who does the initial consultations, and they're the ones who actually do the work in the office.
And Carl, your office, like I mentioned, you started your firm in 1982. Is that correct?
I left the Immigration Service in 82, and I went to work for a law firm. Mm-hmm. It was a New York firm that was trying to go national. They struggled for a while in the 80s, and I stayed with them. And then sometime during the 80s, I just completely broke off and made it my own office.
Right. And so I always like to ask, if I speak to an attorney who started their own practice, and for you, you've been established for so many years, when did you actually realize that you wanted to start your own firm as opposed to working for a bigger firm?
Well, I got a phone call. The way I got the job in the first place, a friend of mine who had been a trial attorney with the Immigration Service, he knew this law firm in New York, and when they wanted to start an LA office, they picked him to do that. Then about 3 years, that was in 79, in 82, I joined him, and then later in the 80s, he decided to go to a large corporate firm. I just got a phone call one day from him saying, Carl, they're gonna double my salary. I'm gonna go to this big corporate firm. And, the next day I was the boss. So I didn't really get to think about it that much. It just happened to me.
Right. So in your case, it was a question of kind of things happened. It wasn't you're sitting there and thinking, I'm going to plan this, I'm going to start my own firm. It was just the reality.
Not at all. I mean, if he would have stayed, I probably would have stayed with him forever. But as it turned out, it turned out to be a lot better for me to be able to run the show on my own.
Right. And Carl, if somebody Googles your name, they're going to see you everywhere. And there's a lot of reviews out there on Google, on Avo, talking about how passionate you are and the attorneys of the firm. And I'm curious, to know what motivates you. So I would like you to share with our audience, with our listeners, a quote that inspires you that we can all share.
Well, the quote might be a little surprising. It's not really a business quote. Uh, my philosophy behind running a business is just really to follow the golden rule, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I find that if you treat clients like you would treat your family, and they will feel the concern that you have for them, and you get back to them right away. You care about what's happening in their family, and when we finish a case, they're not just a happy client, but often we become pretty good friends. And they share this with a lot of other people, and it's even before the internet happened, which was a big breakthrough for us. But even before that happened, we really lived on referrals because, as you know, being an immigration attorney, going to an immigration attorney is not like going to a dentist where you go once or twice a year for a checkup. You get your green card, you get your citizenship, and then you're finished. So you always need other clients. Where are they going to come from? Referrals are the biggest source.
And I like that a lot because I think a lot of attorneys, they don't get it. They feel that clients are just there to support their practice. It's a ways to get some money. But you're right. If you don't treat clients like you treat your staff, like you treat your family, they're going to feel that, and they're not going to come back or refer more people to us. And this is how we make our living. We live from referrals.
Right, and I should mention, just in my family, it just it turned. When I was at UCLA Law School, I didn't even bother to take the immigration course because I just didn't have it in my mind what an immigration attorney would do. I feel a little silly about that, but my wife is an immigrant from the Philippines. Our son, it's actually my stepson, but our son was born in Canada, so he's an immigrant.
Right.
He married somebody who's from an immigrant family from India, so I have two grandsons. So they're 50% Indian, 25% Filipino. So I always tell people I have the perfect family for an immigration attorney.
And it's funny that you mentioned it because I feel the same. When I was in law school, immigration was the last thing that I wanted to choose, and I was always going after the intellectual property, copyrights, business, all the sexy subject. But because you think immigration is something boring or there's no glamour here. But I think once you start practicing this area of law and you understand the stories of your clients, they kind of rub on you, and in my case, you feel you grow with them. I don't know. I mean, what did you choose immigration as a practice?
Yeah, I mean, I can't claim any farsightedness. I did a couple other kinds of law when I got out of law school. My dream was really to be a civil rights lawyer because I grew up in that era. But I was, I think, on my second job out of law school, and the job, they were laying off people. It just didn't look like the company was going to last very long. And my father, who was a federal government worker, said, "Why don't you just take a day off, come with me to the federal building, and you'll just apply to the different agencies there." And I said, "Well, Dad, none of the agencies there are agencies I really want to work for." I told him a couple federal agencies that I would want to work for, and he said, "Well, look, just trust me on this, Carl, but you get into the federal government, and then you can transfer from one agency to another one." So I applied at all these agencies, and we were going up to the 8th floor of the federal building in downtown LA. And I said, what agency is that? He said, "Well, that's the Immigration and Naturalization Service." And I had, I knew a little bit about, the way they operated, and they don't have the best past. We used to have laws that were very racially exclusive and so on. And I just didn't have a good feeling about them. But my father was in a carpool with the chief immigration judge. He gave me a recommendation. I actually took a job in healthcare. But about a year later, I got a call from the FBI saying, "Are you still interested? Because the Immigration Service has chosen you." So I got in there, and then I found out inside the agency, even though in a lot of ways I was a little bit horrified about some of the people being very anti-immigrant, or some of the people, or in general back then, there wasn't a lot of information like they have now to
Right.
share with the public. So it gave me the opportunity from the inside to start a lot of programs to educate the public in how to do their immigration cases.
Right. So you already saw it back then from the inside that the system is not perfect, but you felt that if the consumers are informed, it's much easier for the government to work with them.
Right. I mean, we had, I remember one day I had only been there a few weeks, and my boss got a phone call from somebody in East Los Angeles, which is pretty much a Latino area in Los Angeles. And the teacher of a citizenship class in the evening wanted one of our attorneys to go over there and speak to a citizenship class. And I could just see everybody saying no, no, no. They were really afraid to go to a Hispanic area, that it was going to be crime ridden or something. But where I grew up in the San Fernando Valley was a fairly Hispanic neighborhood, and I just thought, well, these lawyers, they don't understand. You're going to a night school citizenship class. You're not going into a place where there's gangs or anything like that. So I volunteered to do that, and I remember the look my boss gave to me, like it was sort of like, "What do you know?" He didn't say it, but he looked at me, and I knew what he was thinking. And I said, "Okay, well, look, I know that I'm pretty new here, but I think a lot of the people will just want the naturalization form. They'll want to know where to park, what floor to get up to, and then some very general questions like, what do we ask on the government test, things like that. If I fail the test, do they deport me? I mean, what happens?" And I said, and anything that they ask that I really don't know the answer, I'll go home and I'll type it up. I'll bring it in to you at lunchtime. You'll give me the answers, and then I'll write on my own time. I'll write a letter back to the teacher.
Right.
And he said, "Well, okay, then you do it." And it turned out to be a really great experience for me. I mean, the teacher was really nice. I became friends with the people in the class. They were just the nicest people. And then when other teachers would call from Chinatown, from the Valley, my boss would let me go ahead and, he wouldn't even ask anybody else because he didn't want to hear a bunch of no's. He knew I was enthused about it. And pretty soon I went to the LA Unified School District and other school districts, and we were teaching at 50 to 100 classes, and I had a half dozen volunteer attorneys. And it was great. I started taking the congressional representatives to the class with me. I started giving out my cards, so if teachers
Right.
who used to have to stand in line for a half hour to even get immigration forms, and by the way, they would only give them 3 maximum, that was the rule, they would just write me, and I would send them 50 forms, and they didn't have to drive downtown. Some of them were in Bakersfield or Orange County, and I thought, I like this. This is what I want to do for my life.
And Carl, what I like about this story is that, of course, the fact that you were, helping people and you had this innovative idea, but more of that, it shows me that somewhere deep inside you had this feeling that, you can do things differently. And maybe that drive, that notion that, it does, whatever my boss tells me may be right, but there may be another way to do things. And
Well,
that, of course, when you became your own boss and started your firm, I'm sure that thinking also allowed you to become so successful.
Well, I mean, it's important not to artificially limit yourself. I mean, I would try a lot of things. Some would work, some wouldn't work. But the ones that would work, I became really good friends with all the congressional offices in LA
Right.
just because I would bring them out to the class and so on. Um, I got to be such good friends with the LA school district that I'll never forget this one day because we were all sitting there in our little offices with our metal desk at the Immigration Service, and the superintendent of schools calls me up and he wants to introduce me to somebody who was a priest, actually, who ran an immigration clinic and take us both out to lunch. He thought maybe I could be a help to him. So I said, oh, okay, well, how do I get over to your office? He goes, oh, don't worry. I'll come over with my limo driver and he'll come up and get you from the office. So this limo pulls up. All my colleagues are at the window looking out at this limo, and a guy gets out with a little hat, comes up to the elevator and asks for Carl Shusterman, and opens the door for me when I get down to the limo, and they take me out to lunch and so on. Pretty soon we were doing TV shows because the LA Unified School District had their own channel.
Right.
And then I started writing articles about our program for the LA Times. And it was like all this kind of out of the box, because a lot of the people who I worked with would complain like, gee, isn't this a boring job? You just sit here, you interview these people. I said, well, I don't know. For me, it's kind of fascinating because I'm interested in countries around the world. A lot of them I'll probably never get to visit, but these people are coming right into my office, and I can talk to them a little about, Tajikistan, isn't it true this or that? And they would look at me like, wow, you know something about Tajikistan or whatever country it happened to be, China or Japan or, South America somewhere. And I feel like it was fascinating. And then doing all this media stuff and the stuff with the congressman just made it all the more fascinating. And I must tell you, I'm 65 now. And my wife says, well, when do you think you're going to retire? And my answer is always never. I might go into the office, just 2 or 3 days a week. But when I wake up on those mornings to go into the office, I just can't wait to hear what the stories are going to be and what kind of people from what countries I'm going to meet. So I think it's a very exciting area of law. And I should tell you, too, that out of our class of 350 people at UCLA, at that time, I was the only person that went into immigration law. And maybe some of my colleagues, feel sorry for me or something. But I see them, and some of them, they're probably making tons more money than I am, but they get bored, and I never get bored.
That's true. I mean, in this area of, this is one of, we share the same area of law. There's never a dull moment. But Carl, I'm listening to this fascinating story, and what I think in my mind is that you are not only helping people, but you are constantly building relationship, whether you've done it consciously or not. But building relationship is something that you do because you don't plan on it. You do it because you help people. But those relationships can come and help you in the future, and they did. So this to me, I think it is important. Building relationship every day with your team, with your clients, with everybody.
Well, right. And I many years later, not when I was doing this, but I was looking up I needed some business quotes, and I remember seeing this quote, and it said, relationships come first, business will always follow. And I think that is true.
Right, absolutely. Especially in this day and age with social media, and we'll get to it in a few minutes. But Carl, I have one question that interests me, and I think talking to somebody like you that has been practicing for almost 4 decades, how do you see the practice of law evolve since when you started through today?
Well, I can tell you in immigration law, the law part of it is way more complex than it was back in the 70s. To give you just a simple example, my first job at the Immigration Service was doing these citizenship interviews, and the N-400, which is the application for citizenship, was a 4-page form, and the filing fee was $15.
Right.
And right now, I was just getting ready this morning. I have a client up in Sacramento that wants me to accompany him to a citizenship interview, and he, for whatever reason, filled out the form himself, so he sent it to me last night to review. 21 pages, not 4 anymore. Yeah. And the filing fee is not $15, it's $680. And I think that's just an example, but the law itself is just so much more complex. There's part of immigration law that a lot of attorneys call crimmigration, right, where your client actually has a a criminal conviction, and what's going to be the effect of that? Is he going to lose his green card? Is he going to get deported? Is he eligible for citizenship? When I worked for the Immigration Service, it was pretty straightforward. Now we have to contend with Supreme Court and other court decisions, Board of Immigration Appeals decisions. When do you use the categorical approach? When do you use the modified categorical approach? When is something a crime of moral turpitude? When is it an aggravated felony? Most of these things didn't exist back in the 70s. I mean, they only invented the term aggravated felony sometime in the 80s, and they expanded it in the 90s. So it's now, instead of saying, well, I'm an immigration lawyer, a lot of these lawyers say, oh, well, I do crimmigration, or I do EB-5 investment, or I do asylum. It's very specialized within the immigration field because it's hard to master the whole thing. I mean, the way I manage to do it is I'm not smarter than anybody else, but I have a team of people that are each specialized in a particular area.
Right.
So when I get an intake sheet from a client, I review it the night before, and very frequently there'll be things that need a little research. Is this an aggravated felony? Is this was the client who wants asylum firmly resettled in another country? Is the EB-5 investment, what's the source of funds, and so on. So what I'll do is I will send an email message with a copy of the PDF file for the intake sheet to the attorney who specializes in it. And by the next morning, I already have the answer that they've researched the case, and then I know what to tell the potential client, and that the clients can tell whether you're just guessing or whether you really know what you're doing.
And how about the actual practice of law, the business side of it? Getting clients, talking to them, the way they interact with attorneys. Do you see a lot of differences between what used to happen before the internet and even after?
Yeah, I do. I mean, when it was less complicated, and I hate to say this, but I want to be truthful about it.
Right.
I didn't have this system where, before the internet, obviously, I would get these intake sheets, just by email, and I would look at them the morning I showed up. I didn't discuss them with other attorneys.
Right.
And I think I had a wide enough, from working with the government and then working in private practice, I could handle 90% of the questions without having to research anything prior to the interview. But I think now that's really impossible to do that. And I know a lot of my friends who are attorneys, and they're sole practitioners, and they don't have a staff to be able to ask. I kind of feel sorry for them because, number one, it puts a lot of stress on them. Number two, the clients can tell that they don't necessarily know the answer, and they're less likely to retain them.
Right.
But yeah, it's hugely more complex than it was back then.
And another thing that I see, and this is something that even we look back 5-7 years back, that is becoming an issue right now, is right now everything is available for your fingertips. People can review an attorney online and destroy their reputation in seconds. And so I feel that the way attorneys are dealing with clients is changing too. I mean, I know we both are very concerned about reviews, about what people say about us online, just because we want to make sure that everything is consistent. But also the way we deal, maybe 15 years ago, if you're not happy with the client and you said something bad, he would tell his family and that's it. Now it can be all over Facebook and on Google, and you have to really deal with it. So how do you handle this issue with how your attorneys and you deal with clients and make sure it's all consistent?
Okay. Well, I mean, we have been fortunate. I mean, we have quite a lot of reviews. I think I have a few less reviews than you do on Google, but we're both doing pretty well on that. And I would say 99% fortunately they're people that had a great experience and they want to share it with friends. What we tell people is they'll write in and say, an email to us, you saved my life, and just on and on and on and on. It's
Right.
almost embarrassing sometimes, because you think, I'm not God, I'm just a lawyer.
Right.
Um, but what we usually tell them is that we really appreciate you writing to us, but if you want to do us a favor, please share this on the internet. Put it on Google. Put it on Yelp. Put it on, some other page.
Right.
Occasionally, there's somebody. I must say. One thing about our practice that I probably, don't get nearly as many clients as I would otherwise. But most immigration attorneys will provide free consultations, and what people don't realize is a lot of time those consultations may be 10 minutes long or something like that.
Right.
And the attorney doesn't really have all the facts in the case. What I do, I have a 4-page sheet for people to fill out, which could be a turnoff. A lot of people don't want to go through that effort. And then we charge a fee over $400 for a half-hour consultation. But number one, what they're getting is we're studying over those 4 pages, and we're doing research even before the consultation. And then if they go ahead and decide to retain us, we just subtract the amount of the consultation from the fee. So they're not, it's pretty much like they got a free consultation. If they don't decide to retain us, of course they are paying the $400 plus. So I have got, I think only 1 or 2, but I've got a couple people that had gone online and just complained, like, what's this guy think he's doing, charging all this money? And I don't think they really totally understood, the reason that, we thought it was better and we could do more quality work if we did it that way. But if they do it, I try not to be confrontational. I just try to answer them online, try to give them an explanation of why it is we've set it up that way. And, the fact that they have perfect freedom. I mean, they can go to 90 other immigration attorneys, get a free consultation. So if that's their objection, then, they don't have to call me. It's, I always say, you can buy a Mercedes or you can buy a Toyota Corolla. I mean, it depends on your finances and so on. So but frankly, if it was immigration, which determines whether you're going to get to stay in the U.S. or not, I wouldn't try to save money on that. I would try to save money on something. My wife likes to go to Ross Dress for Less and buy things that at Nordstrom would cost 5 times as much. And we always think, great, we got something and it was a good deal. But for doctors or lawyers, I think it makes sense to try to get the best person you can and not just try to save money.
Right. And again, those things that, trying to explain and deal with the client after a bad review or something that was said about you, this is a state of mind that attorneys didn't have to deal with 10, 15 years ago. And so, in my mind, it changes the way we practice law because we have to be more conscious, and also we have to train our staff to be the same. We cannot have an office admin sitting there chewing gum and talking bad about clients, and then they're going to go out and say, we don't feel the same. The treatment was not the same from everybody at the office. Things like that.
One interesting thing, a few years ago, I went to my staff and I told them that, it's so obvious to me that people are choosing attorneys based on reviews. So one of the factors as far as, their bonuses and pay raises would depend on how many reviews mention them during the year. And I thought, well, that'll be great. That'll, they'll be conscious of that. It'll bring in more business. What I didn't realize is that to the extent, that, some client will, some clients are great. They will trust you. They won't call you every day and so on to check on how their case is doing. But other people are very, very nervous, and they'll call so many times, like 10 times in a week, and it's very hard for my paralegals to do their work if they have to answer one client's phone call, 10 times a week. So at a certain point, the paralegals would just say, forget it. This person's, if I keep doing this, he's just going to call me three more times today. After I started giving them credit for how many reviews they got, they did start taking the calls. They sort of switched the way they did it so that they would take the call, but try to, tell the clients, like, look, you can't always get me by telephone, but just send me an email message and I'll respond to you that same day. Usually within an hour or two, I'll respond to you. So it, to the extent that I had any paralegals that weren't calling clients back, and people would call me and say, oh, she's not calling me back, and I would, have to talk to them. That in the last 4 or 5 years, that's totally disappeared because they're conscious of, at the end of the case, there's going to be a review, and I want the client to say, she always returned my phone calls or always got back to me by email. And it really cleared up a problem that we have.
Right, and this is a great tip because a lot of attorneys are struggling how to deal with their staff to make sure that they're on par with their strategy. So you're saying that at the end of the review, if the review was negative, what repercussions do you have with the paralegal?
Well, fortunately, like I said, I have actually I have not received negative reviews about the paralegals.
Right.
To the 2 or 3 negative reviews that I've gotten, just say this guy charges too much for the initial consultation. Nothing bad about what we did on a case or anything like that.
Right.
And I go online and I say, okay, but here's what we do, and and we tell people right up front what it's going to be. I mean, you don't start a consultation until you've charged your credit card for that amount. So some people say, oh, let me call you back, and we don't hear from them, and that's fair enough. But I'm really pretty full every day, so it really hasn't hurt business, and people have to decide, do they want to pay a little more for the consultation? Are they really serious about the case? And if I give them good tips and they know we can do something for them, they can roll that right into their fee for the case, and our fees are not enormous. It's really the consultation fee is the only thing that we charge that's much higher than most of our competitors.
Right. And you have to always have something that distinguishes you and in a way for you kind of limits the people that are not serious, which I think, it's another approach. Carl, why don't you share with our listeners maybe one story or about a failure that you had in your career? I mean, obviously you have a successful practice, but I'll be curious to hear about a story about failure.
You know what? The failure really involves what I was talking to you about before, that speakers program that I set up for the citizenship classes.
Right.
I mean, for a while when we were doing the TV shows and writing articles for newspapers and going all over Southern California doing these classes, I mean, it was something no other immigration office in the country was doing, and I don't know if any other office ever did that. But then I got promoted, and in immigration, when you get promoted, instead of giving out benefits, you become a prosecutor. So I was representing the government in thousands of deportation hearings,
right?
Which by the way, really sounds terrible, but it really helped me in private practice, the fact that I was before judges, every day for 2 years. But when I got that job, when I went from citizenship to immigration court in around 1980, guess what happened to my speakers program? Just totally fell apart. It was really about me. I had these volunteer attorneys, but they were all looking to me, and when I left, that was it. Okay. So I always felt bad about that. I did have a few teachers that I still would go out to their classes, but there was only so much that one person could do. And then after I went into private practice a couple of years later, and I would go out extensively and speak at different places, but always thinking of that old speakers program. In 1995, so this was many years later, one of my attorneys who had the New York Times, he gave me an article, and it was about these grad students at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and they had invented something that you could click. I mean, it sounds so funny now. I mean, it sounds like duh.
Right.
But back in 1995, it just sounded like space technology to me. You would click an icon on your computer screen, and it would take you to something called a web page, which I had never heard of before. And that would be available to people not only in your locality, but available to people all over the world. And I thought, oh my God, I mean, this would do what my classes did, but instead of getting to like 30 people in an evening, you could get to millions of people all over the world who wanted perfect for an immigration lawyer, right?
Right.
But I thought, oh my God, I mean, this system, they're going to charge maybe $50,000 to $100,000 to get this system, because it's just, who wouldn't want something like this? So I thought, okay, a great idea, but I'm not rich. I wouldn't be able to afford it. And then about 6 months later, they came out with something called Netscape. Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, just download it and it's free. And I thought, free? Maybe they're going to give Mercedes-Benz away for free? I mean, there's something about this that I don't understand. Yeah. But in 95, I started a website, and I had articles that I had written for ethnic newspapers, a couple hundred of them. So I started out my website right away with a couple hundred articles, and then over the years have expanded that, and now we do videos and social media and quizzes and newsletters and all this stuff that goes out to tens of thousands, or in the case of the videos, hundreds of thousands of people. But it all started when my baby, which was the talking at citizenship classes, when it went down the tube in 1980, and then came back 15 years later in a much bigger, much more helpful way.
And you had one of the first legal websites on the web. Is that correct?
Yes. I made sure I wanted to be one of the first 20 immigration attorneys. So I discovered this, I think, in January of 95.
Right.
And then a good friend of mine who works in the computer field, who still does my website all these years later. And by the way, his name's Jacob, and he's Israeli. How about that?
Oh.
But he had gone to the Technion, in Israel and so on. And he had never done a web page before, because it was a very new thing. And I was taking a trip to Spain, and I handed him a disc with my 200 articles. And he said, when you come back in 3 weeks, take a look. And I took a look, and all of a sudden I had a website. I thought, I can't believe this. It's like my dream come true from the time I was doing the citizenship classes.
And having that website, can you tell us about what impact did it have on your practice, say 6 months after you launched it?
Well, it had some positive impact, but I wouldn't say, it had this enormous impact. And I remember what I would do is there was an attorney in Tennessee who had
Greg,
the first immigration website.
Right.
And it was a guy I had never heard of, but he was always talking about his website and all the rest of this. And his website seemed to be enormously popular. So what I did, I was going to say I Googled his name, but that wouldn't be accurate because there was no Google. Right. But whatever the Alta Vista or whatever the search engine was, I put in his name, and it came up 250 times. And I sat there all day, and everything that, because he was bragging about his stuff, rightfully so. It was a great website.
Right.
I looked up all 250 times that his name came up on the internet. And I thought, at some point, he's going to just tell me why his site's so popular, So I found a talk that he gave, and he said, well, when you have a site, you must have a newsletter, because people will see the site, and they'll think, oh, that's good, and they'll mark it in their favorites, perhaps. But, I know, how right he was, because I mark things in my favorites and then never go back to them again because I have hundreds of different sites in my favorites. He said, but if you get a newsletter that they sign up for and you make it free and you make it really worthwhile and you have links to government sites and other things that are very important, people will then come back. You'll draw them back to your site. So in the summer, it was June of '96, I started the newsletter, and I got very competitive because the newsletter started bringing in hundreds and then thousands and then tens of thousands of people. I mean, way more than I imagined. And at the end of the 90s, around the year 2000, he would always print how many subscribers he had on his website. And in January 2000, I hit 20,000 and I passed him. And he obviously was competitive like I was, because he started making his newsletter weekly instead of a monthly.
Right.
And he stopped putting how many subscribers he had, because I had become the number one guy. And then I found some other tricks, and over the years we increased it to about 60,000 people, and it's pretty much leveled out, because now there's so many attorneys, so many newsletters. It's really hard for me to go higher than that. But
You still
maybe
have one.
next time we do an interview, I'll maybe I'll have figured it out how to get it to 100,000.
You still have one of the largest newsletters for attorneys out there, not just for immigration attorneys, and I've checked that. And the newsletter is so important. And you mentioned that a lot of the marketers, people not in the legal field who sell products online, they use newsletters even today to sell stuff. They have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. But I think for an attorney to get to so many subscribers, and the other attorney you mentioned, who is still very active in marketing his practice, and he's a big blogger right now and an authority. The value of newsletter is something that these people come to you every month, and they ask questions, and you do the quizzes. So I think that's been very powerful, and I encourage people who listen to the show that whatever, if you start a practice or just getting into figuring out what to do, a website and a newsletter is the first thing that you must invest in. And
I totally agree, because I mean, these days when we have all these tools that we didn't have before, and daily I will look at the Google Analytics to see how many people are on my site. Even in real time, it'll tell you how many people, where they're from, what page they're looking at, all sorts of things. But on the days the newsletters actually go out and thousands of people opening it, you can see the number of appointments that I get will just rocket up on that day. If I could do a weekly newsletter, I would do that, but it's just too much work. So we try to send it out once a month, but on our site, on our front page, we do have something called breaking news. So it doesn't go out to other people, except to the extent that when I put something on breaking news, my assistants will put it out on all the social media. So it'll go out on our Facebook, Twitter, Google+, LinkedIn, and we can see how many people actually go onto our site. Like right now, I think a lot of people know that President Obama is going to do something very meaningful and very positive on immigration right after Labor Day. So I wrote an article, because I've been in touch with a lot of people from the business community who think that not only is it going to be something about helping people who are illegal in the U.S., but totally changing the family-based and the employment-based system of getting green cards. It could possibly double the number of green cards that are given out every year and get rid of all these huge backlogs we have. So I wrote an article about it last weekend and put it on all this social media. And I remember sitting there with my wife. She's looking at me because we're eating dinner, and I have my iPad open. And I'm just looking at the Google Analytics real time. and I'm seeing dozens of people coming from the social media and reading those articles. Um, so it's incredible that somebody sitting here, like at the beginning, I mentioned somebody coming into my office for a naturalization interview from Tajikistan. But these days, if somebody from Tajikistan comes on your website and is looking at a particular article, you can know that. You can see what city in Tajikistan the guy is from. You can see whether it's a guy or a girl. You can see how old the person is. It's just totally amazing, the information you can get on the internet.
Right. I mean, data is so powerful today. But I think, to summarize what you said, as far as your website and what you do today, content, quality content is very important. And, with all the changes that Google made, with the people using keywords, the bottom line is, even today, if you provide content which is helpful for people and they want to read it, the site will do well, and you'll get people calling you for appointments. And you've been doing this for years, and you keep doing this today. So
Well, you know what? I mean, at a certain point, I thought, I remember going to a SEO specialist, search engine optimization specialist, and he says, Carl, just keep, producing more content. And I looked at him and I said, I already have 1,000 pages on my website. I mean, what else is there to say? I mean, I do have a newsletter and we can keep people up to date, but, I have an asylum page. It's there. I mean, what am I going to have, 20 asylum pages? Well, in the last 4 or 5 weeks, I created 20 asylum pages because the way the Google bot, the algorithms work is they want to see different keywords. Well, okay, so if you type in immigration, asylum or something, maybe I'll come up in the top 10, maybe I won't. But that's not all the keywords. So you want to have an article that's political asylum, one on religious asylum, one on firm resettlement, one on LGBT asylum. So we created 20 different pages and videos on asylum, all with different keywords.
right.
And now I see there's no end to this. I could have 10,000 pages and not cover everything, but we do. And I advise attorneys to do this. Recently, we put an Excel spreadsheet, and we had some summer interns, and they put every page on our internet website, what the keywords are, what the title tag is, what the meta description tag is. Because when you have 1,000 pages, it's hard to keep track of this. And maybe you use the same keyword twice, which is not only a waste of time, but actually takes away some juice from your
Right.
asylum page, because you have 2 asylum pages and the Google doesn't know which one to look at. So it's really important for attorneys to code their pages so they have Google Analytics and put out really quality content that covers a whole variety of different fields.
Right, and that's the key. And Carl, as we come to the end of our show, and I'm very grateful for all the content you shared, what would be one piece of advice you want to share with our listeners that are attorneys, either starting out or seasoned attorneys, that can learn from your experience in business?
Well, yeah, I looked, I mean, you'll probably find this very surprising, but in 1976, when I started my job with the Immigration Service, there were 10 attorneys that I was friends with, and we're all in private practice now. And I looked just a few weeks ago, it just occurred to me, I wonder how many of those people even have a website. And I looked, and it was only 2 of us out of the 10 who had a website. So certainly for attorneys my age, or even maybe in their 40s or 50s that didn't necessarily grow up with the internet, I think having a web page, and as you said, probably having a newsletter and probably having social media and video are as important as having legal stationery or a business card. I mean, what attorney would not have a business card or legal stationery? But some attorneys say, oh, I don't have time for a web page and so on. So I think that's a very important thing. Another thing about that's specific to being an immigration attorney is when you have interviews at the immigration service, you can be sitting there for 2 or 3 hours, and you might be driving to downtown, whatever city you're in, to do this. And so I tell these attorneys, well, why don't you hire associates so you can concentrate on other things? Because you don't want to be sitting in waiting rooms for the rest of your life. And they'll say, well, gee, I don't know whether I have a lot of cases now, but I don't know whether I can really afford to pay an associate. If you try to do everything by yourself, and you're going to do the intakes, and you're going to do the web page, and you're going to sit there at the interviews, there's just not going to be enough time. So I encourage people, right now the job market is tough for attorneys, and you can get an associate to go to the interviews for you, but to concentrate on these other things like, speaking, writing articles, not just for the internet, could be ethnic papers and so on, but the internet's important because those articles will stay there, while if you write for an ethnic paper, that's great for that week. And then after that, you got to write another article, because no one will see your old articles. Also, I would tell people, don't feel constrained by, what people did before you. There's a lot of people that you'll talk to that are my age, and like I said, they don't even have websites. Try to think out of the box. Try to take chances. If something doesn't work, I can tell you I've made 10,000 mistakes in my practice, and all that is actually positive, because every mistake I learned a lot from that.
Right. I think this is great advice, Carl, and we'll when we prepare our podcast notes, we'll have that also in the show notes. And I just think this is people need to listen to this and try to implement it, because hire early, set up a website presence, and write and give valuable content. This is where you invest your time, instead of paying these marketers who just suck the money out of the attorneys and promise them promises that never happen. Carl, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show. Why don't you verbally tell us where listeners can find your website and how to connect with you?
My website, I don't know whether this was a mistake or not, but when I created it, I just used my last name. So it's Shusterman, which is SHUSTERMAN.com. And everything else that I've talked to, including the newsletter, the social media, the videos, is all linked to from our homepage. So
perfect.
Anything that you'd like to sign up for, they're all free services. Take advantage of that.
Perfect. We'll make a link to all this in the show. Once again, thank you so much, Carl. And thank you for listening. This is Jacob Sapochnik, enchantinglawyer.com. If you have any questions about what you heard in the show, some of Carl's tips, feel free to email me, jacob@enchantinglawyer.com. I wish you a great day, and we'll see you at our next episode.